Since 9/11, of course, every American wants to be assured that Al-Qaeda is on its way to extinction.
Yeah, President Obama considers his administration's record on fighting terrorism a strength, as he often reminds voters on the campaign trail.
I said we'd refocus on the terrorists who actually attacked us on 9/11, and we have. And today, a new tower rises above the New York skyline, and Al-Qaeda's on the path to defeat. And Osama bin Laden is dead.
So is Al-Qaeda on the decline? Let's get some analysis from two experts. Cliff May is the president of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies here in Washington. Peter Bergen is a CNN national security analyst and the author of the best-selling book, Manhunt, the 10-year search for bin Laden from 9/11 to Abbottabad. Guys, thanks very much for coming in. You heard the president say Al-Qaeda is on the path to defeat. He's softened that a little bit. He used to say it was been decimated for all practical purposes. What do you say?
I think it's very hard for a politician to say that it's defeated, because what if you're even 1% wrong? The political cost of that statement would be very high. But I believe that Al-Qaeda, the organization that attacked us on 9/11, is not capable of anything remotely close to that. And the incident that we saw yesterday in New York, I think, is confirmation. This guy was a lone wolf. Sorry to use that word. A wannabe.
I don't take it personally.
A wannabe who just, he said that he was in touch with Al-Qaeda. That was false. And he failed.
He was inspired by Anwar al-Awlaki, the Al-Qaeda operative who was killed by a U.S. drone.
But clearly that wasn't enough. In fact, this year, it's actually the smallest number of jihadist terrorism cases in the United States, only 3 since the beginning of the year.
You have a different perspective.
I do. If Peter, for whom I have great respect, were saying that Al-Qaeda's capabilities had been diminished, I'd agree with that. But he said it's been defeated, even that it's dead. And I think what has happened instead is it's changed its strategy, and it's changed in its capabilities, but it's fanned out across the globe. Al-Qaeda in Iraq is up to 140 attacks per week, about twice as much as it was earlier this year. Al-Qaeda has boots on the ground in Syria. Al-Qaeda has taken over most of Mali and is bombing Sufi mosques and shrines. Al-Qaeda affiliates are blowing up churches in Nigeria. In Pakistan, we had a girl killed not killed, thankfully, but shot by the Taliban, very close symbiotic relationship with Al-Qaeda because she believes in education for little girls. And we had a bombing just the other day in northwest Pakistan, 17 people killed. They attacked tribal leaders who are not jihadists, not Islamists. So we're seeing changes. We're seeing the organization morph. I'm not sure they can do what they did on 9/11. I hope that's the true. But to say they're dead, to say they're defeated, I think that misses a very important point.
Go ahead, Peter.
Well, I think, everything that Cliff has just said is true, but what does that mean for American national security? I mean, the fact that Al-Qaeda in Iraq is, by the way, it used to control a third of the country in 2006, now it controls nothing. It's certainly capable of terrorist attacks, but we're sitting here in the United States, and we're concerned about American national security. And the fact is, only 17 Americans have been killed by jihadi terrorists since 9/11 in this country. Considerably more Americans die every year of accidental bathtub drownings, so we don't have an irrational fear of dying in our bathtubs. And we shouldn't have an irrational fear of terrorism. Yes, it's a problem, but it has been managed and contained because of the efforts of, a lot of people.
2 points I think that I want to make. One is we shouldn't have an unreasonable fear of terrorism. Absolutely right. But we should also understand that Al-Qaeda has not just a strategy, not just an organization, but an ideology. And I would call that ideology jihadism. And that ideology has not been delegitimized. It has not been discredited. It's still alive and well, and I would say it's spreading. And too few politicians will discuss jihadism, much less say it has to be destroyed as an ideology. We're not there yet. And by the way, today the Treasury Department designated, about the 5th time in a row, an Al-Qaeda representative who is part of a network in Iran. Iran also has a jihadist ideology, and Al-Qaeda and the regime that rules Iran, they are rivals, but they also collaborate in significant ways which most people don't understand.
On that specific point, you agree? The Iran Al-Qaeda connection? Because Cliff is right, they have been rivals over the years.
Well, but
no great love for Al-Qaeda in Iran.
No, except that it is a fact, not only that bin Laden's family, many family members were living in Iran, but also some senior members of Al-Qaeda have been living in Iran, and they seem to be under some form of house arrest. So that's a fact. But again, eradicating jihadism as an ideology would be, that would be a great idea. But you're never going to completely get to zero on this. We've already spent a great deal of money. There's always going to be somebody attracted to these ideas. The question is, can they really do damage to the United States? And the answer is, and this, we've seen it just confirmed yesterday, that the types of people attracted to this ideology are not particularly effective in terms of attacking America.
Let me ask you on that. I mean, you say that Al-Qaeda is very weakened. I mean, you've even written, as you said, that only 17 people in the United States since 9/11 have been killed by Al-Qaeda inspirations. More people are killed every year by dogs. I mean, to that point, if Al-Qaeda shouldn't be necessarily the focus, where should we be focusing in terms of our national security then? Where do you think is the biggest threat?
Well, I mean, I think that's a very good question. As Yogi Berra said, it's hard to make predictions, particularly about the future.
Right.
And but cybersecurity is clearly an issue. I think bioterrorism, there's a sort of Moore's law in biology right now where it's becoming easier. So I don't want to pretend that there are no threats.
Right.
But I think we are living in a fairly unusual moment. If that compared to other moments in our history, this is not. We don't have existential problems as we did in the Cold War against the Nazis and during the American Civil War.
My fear is that if you tell people that Al-Qaeda is dead, and if you also have it out there that the tide of war is receding, we're going to grow very complacent. And I think we were complacent on the anniversary of 9/11. After all, Al-Qaeda or Al-Qaeda affiliates did kill an American ambassador, first time since 1973. 73, I think it was. 79. 79, that an American ambassador was killed. We had the Al-Qaeda flag hoisted on top of the embassy in Cairo. We had demonstrations in more than a dozen other countries. I think we have to take this seriously. Now, that doesn't mean, and I agree with you on this, we should walk around every day fearing that we're going to be killed by a terrorist act tomorrow. On the other hand, we can't get complacent. What we do have to do is try to understand how the terrorist organizations and Iran are morphing, how they're changing, and we have to think ahead of them. We have to not be reactive. It's not enough to say, oh, we had a suicide bomber who almost blew up a plane with his shoes, so let's take our shoes off before we get on the planes. We have to think ahead. And you're right about cyber terrorism, but by the way, where is cyber terrorism coming from? Among other things, from Iran, a jihadi state. And again, you're right, there are those of Al-Qaeda members who are under house arrest. There are those, I would argue, Peter, who are not under house arrest. Look at what the Treasury Department has said about the network for funding and organizing and taking terrorists and moving them around the world that is taking place inside Iran, where Iran thinks Al-Qaeda can help its causes.
I've heard various experts suggest, including U.S. government analysts suggest, Peter, that Al-Qaeda may be more dangerous now because it has spread out. There are different Al-Qaedas, not just the central Al-Qaeda like bin Laden had based in Afghanistan, but there's Al-Qaeda in North Africa, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, all these franchises that have developed, Al-Qaeda, Al-Sharia, or whatever, and that these lone wolves who are inspired by them, they could potentially cause some major damage.
Yeah, I mean, certainly Al-Qaeda in Yemen has attempted attacks on the United States, but they've also suffered a pretty major series of setbacks because of CIA and U.S. Special Forces activity in collaboration with the Yemen government. Drone attacks, yeah. They've lost a lot of territory. Similarly, Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, hasn't shown an ability to attack, let's say, in Europe. It's an organization that has ties to France, but it has never attacked in France. Doing these kinds of attacks overseas, these groups all have local strengths. But other than Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, none of them have shown any ability.
Both of you agree the killing of the U.S. ambassador at the consulate in Benghazi was Al-Qaeda?
I think the jury is still out on that. I mean, I think that Ansar al-Sharia is a group which acts like Al-Qaeda. At the end of the day, if you get killed, it doesn't matter if it's Al-Qaeda or an organization that's very like Al-Qaeda.
There are any number of organizations that have pledged allegiance to Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb would be one. Ansar al-Sharia is indistinguishable from Al-Qaeda, but it may not have, I'm not sure it's pledged Abiyah. Similarly, Al-Shabaab has allegiance, but Boko Haram in Nigeria has not. We have to be careful saying that something hasn't happened yet when we have these enemies who are swearing that they are going to kill us is not the same as saying it won't happen. On 9/10, one could say bin Laden's not such a great danger. He's never done anything big. Eventually he did.
Gentlemen, we're going to leave it there. Peter Bergen, thank you.
Thank you both so much.